So here we are at the start of James chapter 5. And if you're using the passage which Rick Warren likes as the first 6 verses, my guess is you're probably thinking, where did this come from? Because it seems kind of strange. Isn't this suddenly throw in this very strange language about the oppressors and the rich? And I think it's actually a problem because if we separate these 6 verses out, I don't think they make a whole lot of sense. And I'd encourage you firstly to read it in light of maybe the first 12 verses and the next 6, because then I think it makes a little more sense. You see these words to the rich and to the oppressors in some ways are within this context of talking to people who are the oppressed. You know, the people who are struggling, that God will bring all things right, that the people who have power in this world, they're actually the ones who should watch out for judgment, that God's going to bring what they do to bear. And so there's a sense of, call it Advent, of God making all things right eventually is how each of us should be seeing the world. And so one thing to reflect on in your group is how does knowing that God's going to make all things right, how does that change the way I live now? How does that give me patience in the midst of the difficulty? But I think there is a practical word, and I understand why Rick Warren wanted to separate out these 6 verses, because oftentimes many of us in our church and in many churches around the world are actually almost on the side of the rich, not on the side of the oppressed poor. And James' warnings to us, which just feel like a classic Old Testament warning, that this feels like the Psalms or the Proverbs, saying, oh, look, you got all your money, you got all your power now, but you be sober-minded because that stuff is going to be whipped away from you, and the oppression you've done is going to be laid to bear. Is that God also has a word to us that I think that we need to watch how we think about our money, how we hoard it, and how we use it. And are there ways in which we're actually oppressing the poor while maintaining our little lives that we want? And obviously, I don't think any of us, hopefully watching this, are consciously oppressing the poor, but there are ways we're doing it through neglect, through even public policy. It's good things to reflect on our lives. So I think reflect on those 2 pieces tonight. How do I be right related to our money? Because there's nothing wrong with being rich, right? King David, Job, Abraham, all rich people. But they realized their wealth was the Lord's. And they were actually used as an arm of God with their money. How do we do that with the wealth and the status and the education we have today? And secondly, how do we see the world knowing that God will make all things right? How does that change it? And we have a good discussion tonight.